The words came out of her mouth like chipped ice, devoid of emotion. A casual statement about a theft that had cost me $35,000. "Oh, the Bali trip? We already went last week. It was only for family." The phone receiver slipped, hitting my cheek before clattering onto the worn floorboards of my tiny Boston apartment. Only for families. The phrase was a physical blow, a betrayal so absolutely it stole the breath right out of my lungs. I had liquidated the last of my divorce settlement, my entire financial buffer to buy that redemption. A week of sun and fake laughter for the Sterlings. I wanted to anchor myself to the one thing I thought couldn't fail, my blood, and they had taken the money and erased me from the root. That night, I didn't reach for my phone to scream or cry. I poured a generous measure of cheap bourbon and stared into the relentless, frozen sleet of the Atlantic storm outside. They had used my kindness as currency for their luxury. They were about to discover that when you try to financially assassinate a financial planner like Vivian Sterling, the counterattack is not emotional. It is strategic, devastating, and final. If you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, financial exploitation, and the desperate fight for self-respect, please subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. I always find it fascinating to read which cities and countries you're listening from, so don't hesitate to write a comment. Now, please get comfortable. Happy listening. To understand the scale of their entitlement, we have to look back at the desperate 2 years that led me to drain my savings for a flight I would never board. After the divorce, I kept trying to convince myself that family would be my unwavering anchor. My ex-husband, a cold, controlling financier, had systematically dismantled my confidence, my home, and my sense of self. When that life collapsed, the house suddenly felt like someone else's, and I fled back toward the one place I thought was safe, my parents. Instead of finding strength, I found myself getting smaller. I rented a cramped one-bedroom apartment in a forgotten corner of Boston, the kind of place where the old iron radiators hissed through the night like mocking spectators. My job as a senior financial analyst kept me busy enough at my desk to avoid thinking, but never busy enough to stop feeling the deep, cavernous loss. So I did what I knew best. I built a structure of numbers to solve emotional problems. Every time my mother, Evelyn, called about a tight month, I covered the difference, no questions asked. When my father, Edward, whose retired life was really an unemployed life, had his luxury sedan breakdown, I paid the $4,000 repair bill directly over the phone. My sister, Chloe, a perpetual lifestyle entrepreneur who always had a new failed venture, a bespoke candle line, a social media consulting course, never called unless she needed something concrete: rent, utility shutoff notices, an emergency transfer for a new laptop she needed for her next big launch. Over 2 years, these payments stopped feeling like generosity and became a draining routine. Rent, bills, high-end groceries, private club dues. It was the quiet, relentless kind of giving that slowly hollows you out. I started keeping a meticulous spreadsheet of their expenses, labeling it neatly, as if organization could somehow translate into control. I even stopped seeing my therapist, telling myself I couldn't afford the sessions. But the cold truth was, I felt crushing guilt spending a single penny on myself when the family needed shoring up. When I first cautiously suggested the Bali trip, Evelyn had sounded delighted. "We all need a reset, Vivian," she'd sobbed, the phone static cracking with the promise of sunshine. I imagine us standing on the perfect white sand beaches, the soft light illuminating our faces, laughing the way families do in movies, the way we hadn't in years. I saw it as redemption, a chance to finally prove my worth, not as the divorced failure, but as the daughter who saved them all. I spent sleepless nights comparing 5-star luxury resorts, choosing the one with the private villas, the infinity pool, and the fully inclusive gourmet dining. I booked snorkeling excursions, curated private dinners, and arranged VIP airport transfers. Every detail, every dollar of the $35,000 price tag was perfect. I told myself the money didn't matter. I just wanted to see them happy and relaxed. Perhaps then they will finally look at me and see something more than the daughter who had failed at marriage. They would see the daughter who sacrificed everything. On the night I finally hit confirm for the 4 tickets, I sat at my desk, staring at the glowing email. My reflection in the dark glass looked tired, yes, but undeniably hopeful. I didn't know that hope was the single most expensive item on the entire route. The next morning, my mother's simple text arrived. "Got it. Thank you, darling." I smiled, not realizing that simple message would be the last time she would ever treat me like a valued part of the Sterling family unit. Because the truth about betrayal is this: it doesn't come all at once. It builds quietly. One forgotten thank you, one unearned favor, one crippling payment at a time. The call came on a grim, gray Saturday morning, one of those Boston days when the sky looked like wet concrete and the wind carried the smell of salt and snow. I had my coffee, my meticulous to-do list open, basking in the illusion that I was finally putting my life back on track. Then Evelyn's name lit up my phone. I answered with a smile I didn't realize was entirely forced. "Hey, Mom, how's the Bali planning going? Did you see the snorkeling tour I booked?" There was a pause. Not a brief break in service, but a pause pregnancy with casual disregard. "Oh," she finally replied, her tone clipped, almost bored, as if discussing a forgotten errand. "We already went last week, Vivian. It was only for family." For a second, I thought I misheard the name, or perhaps the trauma of my collapse was finally manifesting. My laugh came out thin and brittle. "What do you mean, went? I'd booked those tickets, all 4 of them, round trip, first class." "Yes, you did," she replied, her voice smooth, like she was explaining a simple concept to a slow child. "It was lovely, dear. We just needed some time together. You've been so busy with your work. We didn't want to disturb you with the last-minute change of plans." I opened my mouth, but the ability to form words had evaporated. The air was thick with the sound of her deception. Then, unmistakably, I heard it in the background. The faint, rushing sound of ocean waves, a high-pitched cry of seagulls, and a distant, carefree male laugh. My father's. Then she hung up. The line went instantly dead. The mug slipped from my hand, shattering against the quartz countertop. The hot coffee bled down the white cabinets, pooling on the floor, the dark stain spreading like a spreading shame. I stood there, utterly numb, listening to the old radiator hiss like it was mocking me. Only for families. I spent the rest of the day in a frantic, desperate delusion, cycling through possibilities. Maybe there was a ticket mix-up. Maybe it was a surprise party. Anything but the cold, undeniable truth. But when I pulled up the email receipts, there it was. 4 names: Edward Sterling, Evelyn Sterling, Chloe Sterling, and an administrative account. My name was nowhere on the route. I had paid every cent, but the guest list was strictly them. The next few days were a blur of professional performance. I went to work at the financial firm, smiled through critical meetings, signed off on million-dollar budgets, and conducted complex analyses. But inside, something fundamental was unraveling. Every transfer I had ever made to them flashed through my mind like a ledger of humiliation. The bills, the rent, the car repairs, the countless ways I had tried to purchase belongings. One night, sitting in the silence of my apartment, I pulled out an old photo from a Thanksgiving dinner years before the divorce. Edward and Evelyn stood in the center, perfectly posed. Chloe was next to them, arms linked. I was off to the side, slightly out of focus, holding the camera remote, half cut from the frame. I hadn't noticed it then. Now it feels like a terrifying prophecy. I sat in the dark, the phone face down beside me, and finally realized the truth I should have grasped years ago. Love that has to be purchased isn't love, it's a transaction. And like every transaction in finance, there comes a critical point when the account runs out, when the cost outweighs the perceived value. The next time my phone rang with their name on it, I didn't pick up. Not yet. A cold, bleak month passed. The Boston snow turned to gray, toxic slush, and the city felt heavy, like it was holding its breath. Their absence filled the silence louder than their demands ever had. Then one evening, while I was meticulously sorting through annual reports at my kitchen table, my phone buzzed. Chloe's name flashed across the screen. For a second, I almost didn't answer, but habit and a cruel flicker of curiosity won't come out. "Hey, Viv," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, the kind of manipulative tone that always precedes a major request. "Listen, the rent's seriously overdue again. The landlord's threatening eviction. Can you send $4,000? Just until next week." I stared at the glowing numbers on my laptop screen. $4,000. My mind flashed back to the crystal blue water of Bali, to her guaranteed smile on a beach I'd paid for but never touched. "Only for family, remember?" I said softly, testing the words. "What?" she asked, the sweetness cracked instantly, replaced by sharp irritation. "You heard me," I repeat, louder this time. The silence that followed was thick and ugly, a sound I had never dared to create before. Then she recovered, a harsh fake laugh ripping from her throat. "Don't be ridiculous, Vivian. We're your family. You've always helped us. It's your responsibility." "Not anymore," I said, and I ended the call before she could scream the inevitable argument. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was a cold, clean tremor of relief and power. I opened my banking application, scrolling through the automatic transfers I had set up over the years, rent payments, car insurance, monthly phone bills, even their internet and premium cable. My finger hovered over the cancel button. Then, without hesitation, I tapped it repeatedly. Canceled, canceled, canceled. Each digital confirmation sounded like a heavy steel door slamming shut for good. When I was done, I called my financial advisor, a hawk-eyed woman named Dana. "I want to secure my accounts completely," I told her. "New passwords, biometric verification, total separation from any joint access." She didn't ask why. Maybe she didn't need to. The wind outside cuts sharp against the window pane, but inside, I feel it clears the air. I was ready. It didn't take long for the inevitable response. 2 days after I cut the financial cord, the doorbell of my apartment shrieked, 3 sharp, insistent buzzes that cut through the quiet like a blade. I froze, staring at the small screen of my phone that streamed the camera feed from the exterior. There they were. Evelyn, draped in a luxurious, expensive fur coat, arms crossed like she was about to fire someone. Edward beside her, his shoulders slumped, his eyes darting everywhere but the camera, the picture of impotent male authority. And Chloe, of course, positioned out front, lip gloss shining, her phone in hand, performing her humiliation for an unseen audience. Crucially, standing slightly behind them was a man in a crisp gray suit, clutching a briefcase. I didn't even need to hear him speak to know who he was. A lawyer. A hired mercenary brought in to mediate a financial dispute disguised as a family crisis. I took a slow, deliberate breath, walked to the door, and opened it just enough to show my face in the gap secured by the chain lock. "Vivian," Evelyn said first, the practiced calm in her voice barely hiding a raw, panicked irritation. "We need to talk. This has gone too far." "I'm listening," I said flatly. The man in the suit stepped forward, holding a laminated business card. "Ms. Sterling, I'm Mr. Davies, representing your parents and sister. They're deeply concerned about your recent financial decisions. They've asked me to mediate before this matter escalates." "Escalates?" I repeat, the word rolling off my tongue, tasting like bitter triumph. "You mean, before you try to drag me into court for cutting off your allowance?" His jaw tightened, eliminating the direct hit. "They feel your choices are erratic, potentially unstable. Ms. Sterling, you've been through a lot with the divorce." Chloe scoffed loudly behind him. "We just want to help, Viv. You're clearly not thinking straight." My laugh was short, brutal, devoid of warmth. "Help? You went on a luxury trip I paid $35,000 for and didn't even bother to notify me. You don't want to help. You want control." "Watch your tone, young lady," Evelyn snapped, her composure finally breaking. "We are your family." "Right," I said, leaning closer to the gap. "Only for family. Wasn't that the phrase, Mother?" Her face twitched, a muscle spasm of pure impotent rage, but she couldn't reply. Edward finally spoke, his voice a low, defeated rasp. "Vivian, be reasonable. You know they depend on you. You know the costs." I looked at him, the same man who had once lectured me about the value of independence. They are grown adults, Dad. They can depend on themselves, just like I learned to. The lawyer cleared his throat, sensing the conversation spinning into the abyss of personal history. If you refuse to reinstate support, we'll be forced to file for guardianship to protect your assets and theirs. It's not uncommon in cases of sudden financial erraticism. That word, guardianship, hit me like a tidal wave of ice water. They weren't just trying to guilt me into submission. They were trying to legally own me. And I straightened, my spine stiff. "Then I'll see you in court, Mr. Davies." And I slammed the heavy door shut, pulling the deadbolt home with a satisfying metallic thud. For a long time, I stood with my back against the locked door, breathing hard, listening to the muffled, escalating shouts of my family bleeding through the thick wood. I let them shout. I let them threaten. I let them plead. When the noise finally faded, replaced by the sound of a luxury sedan pulling away, I poured another glass of wine and stared out the window, letting the cold, indifferent hum of the city fill the space that they had once occupied in my life. A week later, the official letter arrived, a formal notice from the county courthouse. Petition for guardianship filed by Evelyn Sterling and Chloe Sterling. The reason? Concerns over Vivian Sterling's emotional stability and financial judgment following her recent divorce. It was absurd. It was medieval. It was exactly what the Sterlings would do. I called my friend Janet the second I finished reading. She didn't sound surprised. "They're trying to break you, Viv. You need a shark." She gave me a name, Daniel Price, a trial lawyer in his 50s with calm, intelligent eyes and a voice that carries the weight of absolute authority. The next morning, I met Daniel in his downtown office. After I laid out the entire story, the $35,000, the Bali trip, the spreadsheet, the demands, he leaned back, steepling his fingers. "What they are doing is manipulation, pure and simple, Ms. Sterling," Daniel stated. "But we'll need to prove your absolute competence in every way possible. We need to turn their narrative of instability into a narrative of independence." "Fine," I said, feeling a cold professional resolve settled over me. "Tell me what we need to do." He listed everything: 10 years of consistent employment records, meticulous bank statements, glowing evaluations from my firm, and statements from my doctor confirming my mental and emotional fitness. If they were going to paint me as unstable, we would show the court the exact, undeniable opposite. For the first time in months, I felt perfectly steady. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. I was fighting with a strategy. 2 weeks later, I walked into the cold, silent cavern of the courthouse. The marble floors echoed under my heels. My hands were trembling slightly, but my chin was high. Evelyn, Edward, and Chloe sat whispering at the opposite table. Chloe was wearing a severe black blazer, trying too hard to look like a woman of business. Evelyn's eyes met mine across the room, holding no warmth, only a desperate challenge. Their lawyer, the same Mr. Davies from my doorstep, stood to speak first. "Your Honor, Ms. Sterling has exhibited signs of erratic financial behavior, emotional isolation, and clear instability after a traumatic divorce. Her family believes she is no longer fit to manage her financial affairs." They had built a fantasy version of me, a woman utterly falling apart. Daniel rose calmly. "Your Honor, what you will see today is not instability, but financial independence. My client is a highly successful financial manager. She has zero debt, no erratic spending, and no history of incapacity. The only thing she is guilty of is saying no to an unsustainable, decade-long dependence. She cut off her family's allowance." He handed over the thick folder we had prepared, pay stubs, financial evaluations, and the records of every single transfer I had ever made to them. Evelyn looked away. Chloe rolled her eyes, but her confidence was visibly wilting. When the judge called me to the stand, my pulse quickened, but my voice was firm. I took the oath, sat down, and met the judge's gaze. "Ms. Sterling," the judge said, his voice measured, "in your own words, why did you choose to cut off all financial support to your family?" I took a deep breath. The cold air of the courtroom filled my lungs. Because I finally realized, Your Honor, that I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was their bank account. A murmur rippled through the courtroom benches. I supported them for years, rent, bills, groceries. I even paid $35,000 for a luxury family vacation to Bali, hoping it would finally bring us together. But when I called my mother to discuss the route, she said, "We already went, Vivian, only for family." The judge raised an eyebrow, leaning forward. "And you were not invited?" "No, Your Honor. I was not even informed until after they returned, having spent my entire savings." Daniel nodded, stepping forward with the final piece of evidence. "The evaluation from my physician confirms absolute mental and emotional fitness." "Your Honor, the only instability here is the financial dependence of the individuals on my client." The lawyer on their side tried to object, but his voice sounded thin, desperate. After a monumental pause, the judge spoke. "The court finds no evidence of incapacity. Petition denied. Case dismissed." Just like that. The sound of the gavel was sharp and final. I didn't smile yet. I simply exhaled, a trembling sound that carried the weight of 2 years of trauma and 30 years of obligation. Evelyn stood slowly, gripping her purse like a lifeline. Chloe looked like she might cry, though I couldn't tell if it was from shame or raw financial rage. Edward avoids my eyes entirely. As they gathered their papers, I turned toward them one last time, my voice quiet but cutting across the marble silence. "You wanted control," I said. "Now you have none." Then I walked out. Outside, the cold air hit me like a baptism. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't carrying anyone's emotional or financial weight but my own. The courthouse steps gleamed wet from melted snow, and as I walked down, I thought about the phrase that started it all: only for family. It is used to sting. Now it makes me smile, because I finally understand that sometimes the only way to protect your peace is to close the door, lock it, and let them remain on the outside. 3 months after the trial, Boston was finally acquitted. The perpetual snow melted into quiet, clean streams along the sidewalks, and for the first time in years, the city didn't feel like a cold cage. I moved into a new apartment, smaller but bright, with wide windows that let the afternoon light spill across the clean wooden floor. The silence here was different, peaceful, earned. I spent my mornings making coffee, not checking my phone for payment reminders. My evenings were filled with small, restorative joys: reading, long walks, and a beginner's cooking class. The first time I made pasta from scratch, the dough tore apart in my hands, but I laughed anyway. It wasn't about perfection anymore. It was about starting over. Through a mutual friend, I heard Chloe was working double shifts to cover her bills. Edward and Evelyn had been forced to downsize to a far smaller house. I didn't feel satisfaction, just a quiet, absolute closure. They were finally, terrifyingly, living their own lives. I stood by my window, watching the city lights flicker in the soft spring dusk, and whispered to myself, "Only for family." This time it wasn't painful. It was the sound of profound peace. For years I had mistakenly sacrificed for love, but losing everything had taught me something simple. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by respect. They said, "Only for family." I learned that real family doesn't demand your wallet to prove your worth. So I kept my boundaries, my freedom, and my name.